Have you been looking for a Taekwondo podcast with qualified people who know what they're talking about, who help you keep up with everything going on in the Taekwondo world? Well, you found it. This is the Taekwondo Podcast. Taekwondo news, competitions and other events, training and sports science, keeping the fans, coaches, and high-performance athletes up to date with the latest news and trends on Olympic Taekwondo. Let's do this. This is the Taekwondo Podcast. And now your hosts, Coach César Valentim and Peter Nestler.
Hello and welcome to the first bonus episode of the Taekwondo Podcast. We are a podcast based out of Austria in English language for everyone out there who likes Taekwondo. The coaches, the athletes, sports scientists, the fans and the families. On this episode, we are explaining why we are doing this podcast. Hello and welcome to this bonus episode. I'm Coach César Valentim and with me is Coach Peter Nestler. Hello Peter, how are you? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your reasons for doing this podcast?
Hello, I'm fine. Hello, César. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this podcast about Taekwondo. A few words about me. I'm Taekwondo coach for many years. I'm also international referee, and now we're doing this podcast together. What is the reason? Why are we doing all that? We want to explain the difference between this podcast and all the others which you could find out there. We will have updated news about events going on at the moment or in the next future, and we will show you the new trends in training methodologies. We will have the podcast weekly, and we will soon tell you why we're doing this. We will explain the importance of sharing all the knowledge about Taekwondo and importing knowledge by listening to awesome experts we will invite in the next few podcasts.
Yeah, well, the Taekwondo is a very popular sport all around the world. Millions of people are doing it. Worldwide, the World Championships and the Olympic Games are quite well spread. They have an attendance from all continents. And it was missing a podcast that would actually talk about that part of Taekwondo. There's the training, especially the new trends with all these new strength and conditioning, with all this technology that's involved. It was important to have such a podcast. Do you think the people outside of Austria are doing the more, less, better, worse, whatever? What do you think it's a big difference in terms of the training and the knowledge exchange of training outside?
Yeah, that's the main problem in Taekwondo is the sharing of knowledge. In some countries, it's quite okay. Especially in Europe, they depend more on science and also are sharing part of the knowledge for the training. But in many countries, the knowledge is not shared at all, or they encapsulate themselves, so they develop their own knowledge and are afraid to get knowledge from outside. So what is your opinion on this matter?
I think in some countries, like in Latin America, they've actually been doing a lot of webinars, seminars, a lot of courses, and they do a lot of exchange. Even though the knowledge, maybe in terms of the sports science part, is not as much developed, mostly financial reasons, as North America or Europe. But the platforms for the sharing of this knowledge is what was missing. Podcasts like this, web platforms, even e-learning modules that would actually be available for everybody around the world. It's also important that we understand that our sport, even though it has specific competition formats and competition rules, it doesn't differ that much from the other combat sports. Of course, the time limitations or the technique are there, but in terms of endurance, most of the strength and condition techniques, we can also import a lot from people with expertise in other combat sports.
Yeah, that's true. We experienced in the last years that our training methods on a high level is very similar to other sports which have had a big development, like soccer or other sports which have a lot of money in them. So we can see that the training methods in some of these sports are really similar 2 hours to the high level sports we have in Europe or also in the United States.
It's important to mention that our podcast, and both of us know this, but it's important for our listeners to also to understand it's not so much about the traditional part. The training of the traditional part of Taekwondo is not what really motivates us to do this. There's plenty of podcasts out there about traditional Taekwondo training. Ours is really more about high performance, and it's also important to understand the competition formats and what it brings to the training conditions and to the athletes itself.
Yeah, that's also the listeners we want to have for our podcasts is those searching for the newest technologies, the newest training methods, and all the modern stuff we have. That's true.
Peter, we have outlined an extensive list of topics we want to discuss. We lined up quite an impressive number of guests. They will come and share their views on some of their experiences in Taekwondo training. Of course, we will also keep up with international competitions. Can you share a little bit with us? What are your expectations? What do you think the main challenges are going to be? Who do you think our guests should be?
Well, on the guests, my opinion is that we should have a mix out of coaches on the one hand, who are really successful out there in the world at the big events. And on the other hand, we should have the science guys, which most people do not know at the moment, but we could bring them to a bigger audience to share the knowledge they could give. And on the other hand, we could also have some talks with athletes, how they feel at the moment with all those measures due to COVID or whatever, and how they feel in structures like in Great Britain with the big team they have in Manchester and the structure they have in the science. And so we should have a good mix of everything.
My point exactly. I think we are missing a lot of the sports scientists part, sports nutrition, sports psychology. We do have a few lined up. We have some big surprises, some big names coming into the show. And I think exactly the point we want to make, exactly the way we want to go, so that we are not something that everyone has been listening on the other podcasts. We want to actually focus on that part, on the development pathway for high performance athletes. Thank you, Peter. It was a pleasure being here with you and with everyone who is listening. It was a great launch to our Taekwondo podcast. There is another bonus episode already available online where we review what happened in 2021, the challenge of the calendar during the pandemic, and of course, the Olympics and its surprises and deceptions. Stay tuned, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a positive review, and share it with your friends. See you next time.
You've been listening to the Taekwondo Podcast, keeping the fans, coaches, and high-performance athletes up to date with the latest news and trends on Olympic Taekwondo. Your host, Coach César Valentim, has almost 20 years of experience with high-performance Taekwondo and has worked all around the world as a Taekwondo trainer. Peter Nestler has been teaching Taekwondo for more than 20 years, and he's currently one of the top referees in Europe. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram at Taekwondo Podcast, on Facebook at Taekwondo Cast, and the website taekwondopodcast.com. See you next time.